the other session. But you're very welcome to this session on inclusion. Just picking up on some earlier themes that have been arising already, sense that now that we're post-pandemic, trying to do things differently. And this session is very much about who we would do that differently in the coming years. So we've got two panelists and two very different experiences. We've got Professor Sukwon Lee from the Seoul National University. He's been there since around 2000 and gained a lot of in-depth research experience with MDRC in the United States, working for 11 different government agencies to look in depth at performance around different areas. And he's now the director of the International Development Evaluation since 2014 in Seoul. So he's very welcome. And thank you for coming all the way here. And colleague from FAO, Serdar Bariev, who started off government service in his native Turkmenistan and was working in the Ministry of Finance, then had a long period of time with UNDP and with the World Bank, and then finally with FAO in more recent years in evaluation. He's our senior evaluation officer, who's come even further from Rome to attend this event and look at some of the FAO experience in recent years around what the learning that's arising from different kinds of partnerships. So I think there's a strong theme about the non-traditional partnerships. I think within the sector, there's been a lot of discussions certainly in recent years about doing things differently and about working with a range of actors that traditionally aren't at the table. And so this session is about some tasters on working with actors that maybe aren't front brain in terms of development agencies' go-to partners. And so I think it's got some fascinating insights there and hopefully some inspiration for ways forward to diversify and make more relevant the range of relationships that we work with in our implementation, but also in our evaluation. And I would point out we've got Joshua Ju, who has come all the way from Korea, and he's the head of the implementing partner for the study that we've got coming from Professor Lee. So if you've got some direct questions of the people that were actually doing the project, Joshua is with us, at least, I think, just for today? Yeah, okay, so welcome, Joshua, thank you. So we'll go through two 20-minute presentations, and then I'll have to be quite strict on time, and then we'll open up for questions, comments, and sharing of experience as well. It's important to stress that. So there's probably an experience around the room where you've tried something different or something similar to what's being discussed here. And those kind of inputs, insights would be welcome. So I hope we'll have plenty of time for that before the session ends. And my name's Ivan Scott. I'm the Regional Evaluation Officer with FAO based here in Bangkok. So I think we can start with our first presentation from Serdar.
Thank you very much, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining this session. I hope we will have an interesting discussion on what it means to have inclusive partnerships for ending hunger. We expect to discuss today lessons learned from the two cases of evaluative and research work, highlighting some examples, not all, of partnerships, and discussing the role of research and evaluation in helping development actors to understand how and under what conditions these partnerships actually support sustainable development and how these partnerships can be made inclusive. So session takeaways, participants will become aware of the strengths and weaknesses of partnership development efforts and gain an understanding of the role that partnerships may play in fostering sustainable and inclusive development. We will also learn about examples of partnerships and the lessons learned, maybe not good, maybe good, and that engagement, how that engagement in mutually beneficial and collaborative partnerships is essential to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth. So the background to this, as you all know, 2030 Agenda calls upon all stakeholders to work in collaborative partnerships. And today's challenges are actually, today's unprecedented challenges call for unprecedented collaboration and partnerships among all actors, not necessarily to just ensure that the partnerships are there to provide necessary resources and combine these resources for development, but also to ensure that we target the most vulnerable. And before we ensure that no one left behind, we also make sure that those who are already farthest behind are brought into the scene of sustainable development. Well, I picked one definition of partnerships for sustainable development from UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs. It's here on the screen. It's an ongoing collaborative partnership among organizations from different stakeholder types, meaning all various actors, aligning their interests around common vision. That means it should be common. Combining complementary resources and competences, as well as sharing risk. There is risk involved in partnerships and committing these resources towards partnerships to maximize essentially value creation towards sustainable development goals and deliver benefit to each of the partners. I find this definition as very interesting, as well as saying to the point and providing the key messages to all the actors of how these partnerships should be developed and maintained. So we have two cases to be presented today. We would have liked to have more, and we encourage participants if they can share their experiences in partnerships or in assessing partnerships. But today we will focus on partnerships with academia and research institutions and partnership with civil society organizations and the private sector. So one case, which will be the first, is the case from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and the other one is case study on child development program to be presented by Center for International Development Evaluation. So let's start with the first one. And just to give you an idea, the Food and Agriculture Organization is a specialized agency of the United Nations system that leads international efforts to defeat hunger. Its goal is to achieve food security for all and make sure that people have regular access to enough high-quality food to lead active and healthy lives. Traditionally, as many other UN organizations, FAO was leading its work and support to countries together with governments. However, it also had a long history of partnering with various actors. In the context of 2030 agenda, all of UN system agencies strived to do better partnerships and more partnerships for sustainable development. But we believe that more concerted efforts are needed in this regard. FAO, as well in this spirit, has intensified its partnership efforts to leverage additional resources, knowledge and innovation, finance and investments, and various other resources towards development impact and achieving zero hunger and poverty reduction. Since 2018, FAO is one of the first UN agencies that started assessing its own contributions towards achieving sustainable development goals, in collaboration with partners, of course. In view of the crucial role of partnerships in this regard, this evaluation series have included two evaluations that focused on partnership with civil society organizations and with the private sector. So this is what we will be talking about today. So what have we learned from these evaluations? Yes, organization has established relevant strategies and mechanisms for partnering with non-state actors, which has stimulated a more open and proactive collaboration. There have been a trend towards increasing the number and variety of those partnerships. However, those that were actually formalized, meaning they were part of agreements and memorandums of understanding, were still limited. Besides engagement in programmatic activities, FAO also supports, and this is one of the comparative advantages of the organization, engagement of partners in policy dialogue with member states and global decision makers through a range of multi-stakeholder platforms and international forums. And we will talk about those further in the presentation. So I want to give you some highlights of successful partnerships, meaning that, well, FAO has done some work and has stimulated these partnerships, and these are the examples. Providing platforms for civil society voices in global policy discussions. So, for example, the International Federation of Organic Agricultural Movements contributes to policy dialogue in topics related to sustainable agriculture through Committee on Food Security. This is the committee that is supported by Food and Agriculture Organization that brings together various decision makers from all over the globe to discuss important issues and challenges. So we give the floor to organizations like International Federation for Organic Agriculture Movements to voice their concerns and to foster more fruitful collaboration. La Via Campesina is another international movement which is essentially focusing on representing smallholders and farmers. FAO also provides a platform for this organization to bring their concerns and bring their issues on the table for policy discussions. Building global alliances. Since 2017, the UN Decade on Family Farming was proclaimed, and this is the global partnership aiming at stimulating development of policies and investments in favor of family farming. So FAO is partnering with International Food for Agriculture Development and the World Rural Forum to ensure that this platform is essentially effectively supporting the discussions and bring the family farming on the scene of global discussions so that necessary resources, investments, technologies, and innovations are brought to the smallholders and farmers. Working in 50 countries through national committees for family farming and the regional family farmers networks, FAO, World Rural Forum, and IFAD have been promoting policy dialogue under the umbrella of the United Nations Decade for Family Farming. Another example of building global alliances, pastoralist knowledge hub. Normally, pastoralists, who are over 200 million in the world, are the smallholders who essentially do not have a voice. Their presence in the global policy discussions is limited. At the same time, they need knowledge, they need to share their experiences and benefit from the others to run their work sustainably and essentially ensure that the ecosystems in which they work are also managed in sustainable manner. So the FAO created this pastoralist knowledge hub, which has, as you can see, many partners on the global scene, which is World Bank Group, Committee for Food Security, European Union, International Fund for Agriculture Development, other UN agencies, and international NGOs. I'm not counting all of them, but there are over 50 partners in this particular global alliance. In Vietnam, FAO supported government in organizing consultations to establish alliance for climate-smart agriculture in the Asia-Pacific region. Today, this global alliance is a voluntary action-oriented multi-stakeholder platform working as a coalition of 14 governments in the region and 32 organizations. As we also mentioned, FAO strives to bring technology and innovations to the work on sustainable food and agriculture systems. Very well known Google Incorporated company brings through its Earth Outreach program a special program that helps FAO and partners, governments, and international organizations to monitor and report against on sustainable use of forest and land management, and most recently this has been extended also to assessing the capture of fish and fish efforts around the globe. Unilever is a global consumer goods company, is joining forces with USAID, FAO, and the World Resources Institute, as well as Google Incorporated, in creating a shared data ecosystem that focuses on key regions, including the Amazon basin, Southeast Asia, and West Africa. This platform will often provide a uniform way to monitor, verify, and disclose progress in reducing deforestation and restoring degraded lands. In the past, FAO and Unilever also partnered in efforts in reducing food loss and waste. So very quickly, FAO and Global Pulse Confederation works on areas of food and nutrition security and safety. Similar partnerships is formed with Danone, again, global food company, as well as the partnership with global food company Mars Incorporated. Bringing services to the communities in need. Partnering with the Dutch cooperative bank, Rabobank, FAO works in Eastern Africa to help smallholders access finance and ensure sustainable production. IKEA Foundation is strategic philanthropy that focuses grant making on tackling poverty and climate change. Again, FAO, IKEA Foundation, and UNHCR help 17,000 refugees in Eastern Africa in using agriculture as a means of sustainable livelihoods. Another example is in emergency programming, where Kuhne Stiftung Foundation, which is Swiss-based non-profit organization, collaborate in improving logistics of emergency response. In protecting environment and conserving biodiversity, FAO works with International Fertilizer Association, Biodiversity Partnership Mesoamerica, and in Vietnam, FAO and IKEA collaborated on forestry certification, meaning that this certification program ensures sustainable forest management, processing, and production of timber resources. What we have learned, of course, all of these examples are very positive and interesting and successful, and there were positive contributions. However, these achievements were limited in scope, magnitude, as well as geographical coverage. Many of engagements have not been sustained beyond an initial period of engagement, demonstrating limited replicability and sustainability of results. Partnerships were not strategically planned, but more of an advantage of working in a proximity in a similar region or country. Modes of partnerships were also limited to a few instruments of collaboration. A risk management and due diligence mechanism, as in all UN systems, have been effective in protecting organizations from risks. However, they were considered to be a little bit more restrictive, limiting the number of potential partnerships. Again, we found that more strategic and coherent approaches are required to ensure that partnerships are actually integrated in the core areas of work as compared to partnerships for the sake of delivering certain projects or interventions. What are the main constraints and challenges? Well, local context is a big factor. So in some countries, we have a very vibrant civil society, and this also stimulates better partnerships. Similarly, some private sector engagement in countries where the legal environment is conducive are possible. In some countries, this is very restrictive. FAO traditional role as well is playing a big role, because normally a culture is of working with governments and other development agencies as compared to non-state actors. That also limits the number of partnerships. Administrative burden, the time required for entering into agreements is another constraint, as well as you need effective guidance, capacity development, and certain resources that needed not only to initiate partnerships, for example, by providing seed funding, by providing some initial resources, as well as to further develop, nurture, and maintain these partnerships to ensure sustainability. What did we recommend as part of these evaluations? That a new long-term vision needs to be developed for partnerships, focusing on strategic partnerships to fully utilize potential for joint global actions. In this context, FAO should consider expanding its engagement towards effective multi-stakeholder partnerships as compared to bilateral traditional ways of partnering. Procedures need to be improved, streamlined, made more simplistic, as well as more efficient modes of collaboration to be provided, and a better variety of various instruments for entering into agreements. Each partnership requires due attention. That's what we learned as well. Not just that the partnership is there and we hope that everything will work smoothly. It requires assessment of its effectiveness along the lines, looking at the lessons from the partnerships and addressing any constraints and challenges as we go, including the local level constraints. For example, distribution of land for the partnership intervention sometimes was not the best. FAO should also improve the assessment of the value of impact of ongoing as well as past partnerships, and these two evaluations have given the organization quite a lot of idea about how this can be done. What was the impact and benefits of this evaluation? So an overall approach to partnerships has changed. FAO is now more proactive and more open to partnerships as compared to the previous periods. FAO governing bodies essentially asked to present a new vision and a new strategy, which has been successfully done. And there is a progress report already, which is being reviewed by governing bodies to ensure that this proactive approach is actually in place. Of course, we know that this brought some benefits. Partners have been able to approach FAO in a more collaborative manner. There are dedicated efforts in mapping potential partnerships in each country where FAO work. There is transparency and accessible information for partners, as well as on how the partners can be formed and on what thematic areas and topics. And less restrictive risk management procedures are now in place, and the due diligence takes much less time, so bureaucracy has been reduced as well. We also provide the links to some reference documents, the two evaluations, as well as the management responses showing how the organization has reacted to the results of these evaluations and lessons learned. And there is also a progress report showing how the organization has performed on implementing these management actions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Well within time. Well done. Thank you. We've got a minute or two. If there's any specific questions on anything that Serdar talked through there, any specific questions on that? Clarifications needed? No, we're okay. Well done. Well done. Thank you. So we're going to switch over.
Perhaps any experiences from the audience on partnerships or any constraints and challenges we have in this regard?
To try to get them engaged for multiple years or multiple different types of methodologies or regions to be able to be engaged. Like you use Google or Unilever, those are global corporations. So how best can we go about, you know, working with the private sector on these long-term strategic partnerships? Are not just, you know, initially there's a lot of benefit, but they don't see the long-term strategic value of that. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. May I respond? Yeah. So in a sense, you can see from the progress report of FAO on how they perform now. So essentially, for each thematic area of FAO work, be it nutrition, food security, work on fertilizers, or any other topic, fisheries, crop production, FAO creates a so-called value proposition for private sector companies, essentially showing what they can contribute and what they can benefit from in entering into partnership with FAO. So that's an opening page, essentially saying that this is what you can get and this is what we offer. Let's discuss and negotiate. And essentially what we strive to do is ensure that these partnerships are longer term, and we enter into so-called monitored partnerships with the key performance indicator system that has been developed for each particular year or any other milestone that the partnership agreement would agree on. I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Andreas from the Green Climate Fund in Korea. My question, one comment, one question, and I fully agree with the former the speaker just before me. We also noticed that partnerships, if not explained in terms of value for money or value and impact, are very hard to keep, especially when you talk about the private sector. And I think we're all agreeing on this. What we're seeing is that one has to find good methods and tools to describe the value, and then also to communicate that value in the right moment, perhaps throughout the partnerships in a continuous and re-emphasizing manner. So that is one experience that we share very much with what you've presented. The other question was on your recommendations and the one on risk structure being in place. What we noticed here in our organization in the Green Climate Fund is that yes, it's definitely a question of risks, on how you risk is perceived as or due diligence is perceived as a barrier, and then this inherent question about risk is also something that's always coming along with the conversation. It's always dragging on the conversation. But what we realized that simply putting in place a risk structure is not sufficient. What we are talking about at the fund is the question of, yes, having a risk structure in place, but also somehow advancing a culture of risk. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to it, because the recommendation and the benefits seem very clear, but we're realizing that risk structure is not enough, at least in our example. Thank you.
Shall I respond? Yes. Thank you so much. I mean, on the value creation, in a way, I think it's a more related to a case-by-case scenario where the so-called various actors within FAO, the divisions, the experts, consultants who are working on a specific area, and the actors, non-state actors like private sector, civil society, agree on what would be the value creation. And I think this has changed from the past. Now we call it value proposition. So they agree on a 1-2-page document on what is the value of these partnerships, and essentially not just to FAO or the country where FAO works, but also to the partner. That's the change from the past. On the risk, we used to have a time lag, what we found from an evaluation, of responding to potential requests for partnering with the organization. And this time lag was like from 6 to 8 months. As a result, out of over 350 applications, about 50 were processed and agreed upon, while the others already left and partnered with another organization. UNDP is an example where they have a simplified procedures and they work. UNICEF is another example where they also offer various instruments for collaboration. So we were a little bit behind, but now, today, the due diligence mechanism and risk assessment mechanism has changed, including the culture. So people working there are essentially not only protecting the organization, but also ensure that risk management is not unnecessarily rigid, and it's not putting additional barrier for the partner to enter. So again, there is a discussion as compared to the previous screening of the proposal without even talking to the partner. Thank you.
Has a history of working with the government in the countries now, and especially Ministry of Agriculture. But at country level, civil society organizations sometimes have a vision or objectives that are not completely aligned with government objectives now and priorities. That's why they exist. For example, on land tenure, women empowerment, indigenous people's rights. So I'm wondering, how can FAO do when they are asked to collaborate, to partner with civil society organizations on programs that don't align exactly with government priorities? Did you find some cases like this, and do you have some interesting examples?
Thank you. Well, it's an issue in some context, and as I said, context plays a big role and factor in with regard to the partnering. So in some countries where there is vibrant civil society and then they can essentially interact with government and parliaments and other key players without any constraints, then there is no an issue. However, in some countries, there is a more difficult environment, and what FAO strives to do is to maintain an independent status as the United Nations organization, but still bringing the civil society organization to the discussion. Now, in terms of the interesting example, I would say, well, there is an alliance for sustainable agriculture development in Central Asia, in Kyrgyzstan, that really felt a little bit of being left outside of the discussion between the FAO, government, and the other actors such as the international financial institutions. However, what FAO did is to bring this particular NGO to the scene with a network of the other organizations where overall contribution from all the actors to the national program in Kyrgyzstan was discussed. And this is where they presented their voices and concerns and essentially were able to partner later with the government and with other actors, including the FAO. Thank you.
Thanks. I think we've got time for just one more, and then we'll hand over to Professor Lee.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Abhinash from Evaluation Office, India. So my specific question is regarding the capacity, the partnerships which you enter into. Like, is it demand-driven, or like you map the kind of hunger? Because we have to like fulfill SDG 2 by 2030. So if we map the hunger and enter into partnership, I am more interested how we will enter into with the state actors, so that we end hunger where there it is. So especially the major ones. And so what kind of like partnership plans you have, and how do you enter, how much time it takes? As you said, it takes time, but how much time, and how do you actually align it with SDG 2 ending hunger? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very interesting, but at the same time, very difficult question. I think, again, the answer is in the approach. So while, again, I'm talking about the previous period where FAO has traditionally focused on working only with governments, or mainly with government, and any engagement of the non-state actors was complementary, and as well they were service provider as compared to the true development partner. What is meant by true development partner? It's a partner that has a voice, that has the power to say anything and to demand anything. So today, the approach has changed from the traditionally only listening to what one party says, of course I'm talking about the government, to the discussion which is now more inclusive, bringing all the other actors to the scene. Again, on what is the plan, I think it's in the strategic framework of the Food and Agriculture Organization. We have this strategic framework aligned to all sustainable development goals, and SDG 2 is one of the most prominent there. And I think the answer is there, but again, the answer would be in the actual work at country level. And this will be measured by evaluation office, by us, and then we could essentially tell whether we are progressing well. By the way, SDG 2 contributions from FAO have been assessed, and I can share the example of this evaluation if we can talk after the session. Thank you.
Thank you. There'll be time afterwards for any further questions you might have on that. But let's switch focus now to Professor Lee and the experience from Korea.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I thank all of you for joining our session, and also many thanks to FAO and AEW for organizing the joint session with us. I would say my presentation today is about detailed example of one of the three type partnerships that is described by Sedar just now in his presentation. Our case study is about the partnership between research organization and NGO, and the product of the partnership was the evaluation study on the effectiveness of KFHI. This is the name of the organization, which I will explain later. Child Development Program. Okay. So before I go into further details, I would like to explain more about the platform that our site has in place for regular collaboration with NGOs, and there are two types of partnership platforms, and actually there is a I'm sorry for okay, yeah. I was looking for where it is. Okay, the first one is annual evaluation capacity building program for the NGOs. So that is a one-day intensive training session, and it is a regular activity which has been conducted every year since year 2014, and it has been attended by many NGOs working in Korea, including KFHI. And the training session was funded by SNU SIDE's own budget and is free for all participants. So I think participating NGO will feel beneficial for attending our session. The second one is a joint research project. Joint research project is not a full-time initiative, but is an intermittent joint research opportunity that is developed when NGOs and with common interest and opinion coincide with us. The word joint means that the burden of research is shared with each other, and the research process is carried out jointly. Since the research cost is shared, NGOs can get the evaluation results of their project at a lower cost, and site can get the motivation to continue to develop them into academic achievements while having joint intellectual ownership of the research products. I think this is the classic example of a sustainable partnership structure based on the common purpose and mutual benefit. Okay, now I will describe about the organizations included in the case study. Seoul National University Center for International Development Evaluation, which I run as a executive director, is a research center specializing in international development and policy evaluation. We have a mission to contribute to improving the program by assessing the aid effectiveness with rigorous evaluation method with international standards. And we conduct evaluation research project, also provide to the evaluation people in the practical field with the capacity building programs, and we also attend to many international networking activities. And Korean Food for the Hungry International, KFHI, is a Christian NGO dedicated at supporting vulnerable communities suffering from hunger and poverty. And they work with, in collaboration with churches and local communities. I will explain it detailed in later. And they provide aids through international relief and development program and domestic welfare program, North Korea support program, and self-reliance program. So our case presentation today is about one of their domestic welfare program. Okay. Okay, so this is the background of our specific case of the evaluation study. So this is the explanation about why the study was needed. So more people, more children in the world are suffering from this poverty and hunger. And KFHI has been conducted their child development program for over 10 years, helping 94,291 children ages from 5 to 18 years. And by the 210 local centers around the world has been implementing that program. And KFHI felt the necessity for the effectiveness, examining the effectiveness of the CDP program, and we agreed on the mutual, the same purpose to study the program's effectiveness. And we joined the, we signed on the MOU and launched the joint research project from year 2022. It was a 3-year, multi-year research project, and my presentation today is about the analysis results from the first year of the 3-year study. Okay. As you can see here, the CDP program by KFHI aims for holistic child development. To achieve this aim, KFHI intervenes not only with the targeted children, but also with their parents, churches, and communities, emphasizing their shared responsibility for caring for children. As shown in the figure here, the CDP project provided a variety of service activities in 4 main domains: education, socio-emotional, health and nutrition, and faith. What is particularly noteworthy about this graphic is that this program model designed by KFHI is based on the biblical worldview of Christianity. As shown in the figure here, in order to raise children the way God wants them to be raised, families, churches, and communities must all come together and take on a shared responsibility. In this program model, we can see another form of a partnership. In other words, KFHI's service delivery model itself is a structure based on a partnership between NGOs, families, churches, and communities. Although this is a very interesting form of partnership, we will not examine in this in detail, but it's still worth mentioning. Today, I would rather focus more on the partnership between NGO and research organization. This slide is about the specific activities in each sectors of the CDP program. Various activities from for 5 different sectors were provided for over 10 years in many countries. Okay, for the research, for the evaluation research, we use the data listed here in this slide, and as you can see here, the data from various sources were utilized for our analysis. These data were not originally collected for this study, but were collected by KFHI in a large-scale survey conducted in year 2017 for their own purpose of monitoring. And we found that it had a limitation because it was a one-time cross-sectional survey, and therefore it did not provide enough information to assess the net change in the outcome of the program. However, after discussions and consultations between the two parties, we decided to prioritize possible analyses using the existing data for the first year of the study period. And at the same time, we agreed on making recommendations on how and what kind of information KFHI should investigate when conducting new surveys for data collection in the future. So today's presentation is about the analysis results of the first year study during the 3-year study period. Okay, so from here I describe the findings from each sector. As you can see from the highlighted part, the increase in the children's participation in education program activities carried out at the school at a statistically significant level. It means that that religious factor has a statistically significant impact on the education program activity participation, and those findings are consistent with the findings from similar previous studies. For example, here participation and commitment to religious activities and the religious composition of adolescent social network have a significant and positive impact on education sector, which is presented by Ragnoyers in year 2000, and also in another studies we can find similar findings. Also, interesting finding is that the compass indicator, which measures the concept of I feel I have a lot to be proud of, and some people in my community can make people sick through things like curses or evil's eye. Those are the concept which is emotions generated in ways that are contrary to what Bible says, and it has been shown that those concepts are emotions are to have a negative impact on educational outcomes, which is consistent with the positive findings from the above. And also we have the same findings in the health sector and also in the socio-emotional sector. The interesting thing was that it was very clear and strong in the sector of socio-emotional sector. And children's religious or spirituality activities has a direct and significant impact on children's social-emotional development. And in particular, this impact is particularly stronger in the on the measure of future orientation of children. So we came to conclusion that religious belief and social emotion, particularly future orientation, not only influence on one another, but also has a definite and extensive influence on almost all outcome variables in all sectors. So also that finding leads us to the conclusion that the strategy to foster a future orientation of children through spirituality activities is an essential tactic to strengthen program effectiveness across all sectors for KFHI. So we suggest that it is an important and distinguished value for KFHI holds, and they can appeal that aspect to the donors. Oh, okay. So this graph shows how the participation rate in the religious activity of children changes over time. So horizontal axis of the graph shows the duration of the sponsorship or participation, and a vertical axis shows the participation rate in the religious program activities. As you can see here, it shows a curved graph, and interestingly, in the beginning of the engagement, the participation is decreasing to a certain time point, and again, it goes up after 68 months or 5.67 years of participation. So from these findings, we suggest that if children do not lose interest in participating in spiritual activities and remain engaged until they reach a certain age, at which religious beliefs are formed, then a strong faith-based spirituality may be sustainable. The reason why we did this analysis because we know that the religious belief have a very important impact on children's quality of life across all domains. So strategy to increase children's participation in religious activities is a key to increasing the effectiveness of their program. So we conducted this analysis and we were successful in drawing suggestions. Gains from partnership. I think I can skip this slide because it overlaps with the last one. So I will just jump into the last slide, which is takeaways. First of all, the effectiveness of the partnership was maximized joint decision making by close communication between the two organizations throughout the entire research process, starting from the stage of deciding on the research themes. So from the beginning to the end of the study, the both parties frequently communicated and shared opinions with each other and confirmed each other's position and directions and interests. So the study was progressed without any stress, and we are both satisfied with the results of the analysis. Second, understanding the background, purpose, motivation, and mission of the partner organization, as well as the individual research topic, can enhance the effectiveness of the partnership. So for our case, our understanding of KFHI's mission and background allowed us to focus research on analyzing the impact of the religious belief on various outcomes. After learning that KFHI, unlike other NGOs, has a strong Christian mission that guides organizations' activities, and that the model design of their CDP program is based on a biblical worldview, I felt that using religious belief as a focal variable in the study would help to create a logic that reinforce KFHI's mission and values. Okay. Third, multiple rounds of mutual feedback help to improve the results of the research. Fourth, for the partnership to be sustainable, the relationship must be set up so that both organizations have a common goals and mutual benefit. For our side, the inclusion of a religious belief as a new research topic was also beneficial for the SNU side, as the fact that religious belief can be a key moderator of effectiveness of a development program is a relatively new topic that has not been studied much in the field. So it was an opportunity for SIDE to make a new academic discovery and contribution. And of course, KFHI has their own benefit. And fifth, ensuring that contact person at both organization is clearly designated and not changed after being designated is essential for ongoing communication and partnership. And lastly, disseminating the results of partnership can create new opportunities for productive partnerships with more organizations. So, in fact, the KFHI side collaboration was actually spawned by a series of seminars at which side presented its collaboration results with other NGOs such as Save the Children Korea or World Vision Korea. And these seminars not only brought KFHI and SNU side to come across each other, but also gave KFHI a chance to witness the firsthand what partnership between research institution and NGOs can accomplish. Thus, a virtuous cycle was created in which the continuation and development of partnership spawned other new partnerships. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Okay, so two very different presentations there. What I'd suggest is if there's specific comments, questions for Professor Lee on the example from Korea. First of all, so let's hear any comments and feelings that people have got on that one first. And then perhaps we can use the remaining time to open it up for the broader discussion and maybe some of the key takeaways that we can extract from this session. We've got plenty of time. We've got half an hour left if we need it. So let's start off with any specific questions, comments. Yes, go ahead, Abhinav.
Hi, thank you very much for the insightful presentation. So my specific question is regarding at what age the religious beliefs get formed, because this is a 94,000 odd children you were speaking about, the child 5 to 18 years. So what age like the religious belief you start imparting, and 5.67 years you are saying is the time which they should spend in order to have this impact. Second one is a query actually is regarding, so this you are saying the partnership with the churches who will sponsor their education. So that is how we are seeing partnership with sponsorship having impact on educational outcomes. And what is the model you used for this research? And have we taken into account the income levels? Have we controlled for that? Because that's very, very important. And though there is sponsorship is there, but still the income level of the parents will matter to some extent. Yeah, thank you.
Can I go back to the slide? In order to, I'm sorry. So for the first question, actually I just skipped the slide about the findings. Oh, here. So as you can see here, what we have found is that the participant rate decreases over time and then go up again after exceeding certain time point of the number of months of participation, and that turns out to be 68 months. So from the fact, we can conjecture that because most of the children came into the program at the age of 5 to 7, so from here, so the fact that children's participation in spiritual activities continue to decline until approximately 5 years after the onset of the sponsorship suggests that children who enter into sponsorship at an average age of 5 to 7 may lose interest in participating in spiritual related activities if they do not form religious belief until they are approximately 10 to 13 years old. So there is some kind of theory about formation of religious belief, and the religious belief, the formation of a religious belief is affected by the age of the children. So when you reference that theory, then you can come to the conclusion that it is important that children do not lose interest in participating in the religious activity until they reach at least 10 to 13 years old. So that's the conclusion that I combined with the theory from the related field. So is that an answer to the first question? Yeah, and the second one is the partnership with the churches. So I think it is more appropriate for KFHI to answer this question, but as far as I know, churches contribute to the partnership in two different ways. Churches in Korea or other developed countries, they contribute in a way of donation, giving a generous donation to NGOs. And then small churches in developing countries, they actually working as a program implementing agencies in each countries. So it depends on the country's context and background, but in many countries, churches and pastors are in charge of the operation of the program management. And in some cases, pastor is the only personnel for program operation. So what was your question? I forgot. So is that? Oh, actually, yeah. Actually, I didn't present the analysis model, but we did not forget to control for all the compounding factors. And we know that we have a limitation that we could not directly estimate the impact of the program itself, but we just estimate the effect of the religious factors on the outcome of the program. So you can, you can predict that those factors can have a moderating effect if we have a data to estimate the impact of the program. But in order to estimate the impact of the program, we need more data, and we need multiple time point longitudinal data. So that will be conducted in the following years. That's what we agreed on with the KFHI. Yeah, but at least, but we can draw some implications and suggestions. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Samuel Grunler from Nauru. Thank you for your presentation, very interesting. I just had one comment in regards to the religion. I just want to know, how do you manage when each country may have more than one religion? So which one you accept or recognize, or how do you combine them together? So I'm very would like to know, how do you manage, because in my country too, although we Catholic and whatnot, we have different religion. We also try to include them in our schools, but not as part of the curriculum of the education, but perhaps maybe one or two times a day in a week. Then we invite the pastors to come and do a religious instruction, something like that, but not so much as like a part of the curriculum. So I'm just wondering, how do you manage religion when it's a very broad. I believe it's very broad. Rather than health and social emotion education, that can be identified like, but not, please.
Okay. So first of all, when I say religion is the Christian. So KFHI is a Christian mission organization. So it's solely based on the religion of a Christian. And the churches is a Christian church in all of the world. And when we analyze this data, the religious factor is separate from educational sector. So education is separately operated activities with educational staff, and religious activity is separate activities. So pastor or religious person do not engage in the education activities as far as I understand. So we try to estimate the effect of the separate religious activities on the separate education outcomes. But sometimes I think Director Chu it is more appropriate for him to respond. Do you have anything to add to the religious operation of the program?
Yes, my name is Joshua Ju. I'm working for as an international director of KFHI over 10 years. And thank you for your question. As the pastor said that we are very strong Christian organization, and also we, as many local community, there is another religion and another belief. There is already, but we didn't push the Christianity. We also we thinking very important Christian spiritual program, but not against their will or their kind of their lifestyle, something like that. So we thinking that the outcome of education is related to our all of our program. So if we do more than 10 years, we focus on our value and mission and many activities, and they the mobile age, and they are. We also not just implement the program. We sometimes give the facilities or the kind of any other programs, something like that. So yeah, as your NGO, we don't have a the result of this kind of a program, but yeah, I can say harder to describe, but there is a relate to the education and spiritual program. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. I'm wondering, is there experience in the room that could shed a bit of extra light on this, because we've got a very specific example from Korea on this initiative, but there must be experience in the room about this broader issue about. You talked about future orientation and this sort of sense of confidence building and the contributory factors that brings to the educational environment. I think there was something there in the study about behavior and things like that as well. So it's one of those very, very intangible aspects of a young person growing up. And I'm just wondering if there's other insights we've got in the room about specific initiatives or learning that has come from other other countries, other contexts that might help us kind of understand this a little bit better. Okay, that's clearly an area for further research. Yes, please.
Thank you, colleagues. Once again, Andreas from the Green Climate Fund in South Korea. Not necessarily in education, but we've certainly in climate evaluations, we've certainly found ourselves in exactly the same discussion on how are you getting people, and I use an example from the agricultural sector, how do you get people to adopt the technologies that you're proposing, adopt the blueprints of some technologies that have been found truthful in other contracts in other countries. And that usually requires a little bit of a think around the behavioral element of the work that we do. And for evaluations, that's particularly difficult. So, you know, I jotted down 3 points when I followed Professor Lee's presentation today. And going away from the question of Christianity and education, one of the things that we realized with our project evaluations, or our, we call them real-time learning impact assessments, what we realize is it's very hard to make a proposition for a partner when we're evaluating to say, let's do this together and continue that partnership together to unpack some of these things, because behavioral science is and behavioral aspects are not explained easily and quickly. So for us, and I wonder, Professor Lee, if you can speak to this a little bit, for us, one of the most important things was come in early. So starting as early as possible in the implementation of the project, or even in the development of the project, has been found beneficial to the discussion of how can we build in evaluations, how can we build in to review what we're doing, to review our activities if they're impactful or not. The second thing that I noticed with Professor Lee's presentation is it seemed to be a stepwise approach. So if you could speak a little bit to these steps, what we found is it's been extremely hard to keep a partner or a project interested in evaluations if you can't bring value quickly, if you can't bring an explanation quickly. So from what I see here is, I see we're checking on the activities. Have the activities led to any perceived changes? We might not be able to say more on the impact base because we don't have a counterfactual. I believe that's where you were saying the second step may look at this from a counterfactual perspective to say what has happened in villages where there wasn't a program. And so it would be interesting to see how that partnership, because you spoke about mutual benefits, mutual understanding. So if you could unpack that a little bit, that would be interesting. And the third thing, what really was very interesting for me at least, is this question on data. And I think we touched a little bit on the biases question, but it's extremely hard to go into a program and as an evaluator go in with your own data requests, with your own, at least again, this is our perception at the Green Climate Fund, to go in and say, okay, we want to collect new data. You're usually only left with what's already been collected in surveys, but that might not answer the question that you're after. So if you could reflect a little bit on how difficult that kind of engagement is and what you may have learned from that, that could be extremely, extremely valuable, in particular on that question on future considerations, because that behavioral element for us, it's very difficult to capture. Thank you.
Any more comments on that particular theme, or should we turn to Professor Lee? Yeah, go ahead. I've got two more, yeah?
So basically sharing experience from India. So it's not about having funding or partnership with churches. It's basically some of the government programs which provide scholarships and to the meritorious students. And there, then again, we see the impact of such kind of provisioning of additional funds to the kids. So that's a partnership, not exactly partnership, but it's a government scheme. So that has come out to be quite having impact on the educational outcomes, increasing the children's education by a couple of years. Similarly, feeding programs. So FAO will relate to it. So the midday meal scheme, which we now call PM Poshan, so that's actually feeding almost 8 million kids around India. So that is provisioning of midday meal till the age of 14 years, secondary education. So that is again has increased the number of years going to school and remaining in the schools. So no, like kind of India is a religious country, of course, but the kind of churches funding and all that is one is Christianity is not that many population in India, and then this kind of partnership is not there, but it is in other manifestations. So as I am speaking, so another is like providing additional hours of schooling to those who are not that good in some of the subjects. So that's called a specific program in Rajasthan called Bal Sakhi, and so they provide additional hours after the regular school hours. So these are like some of the interventions, and that specifically targets this 5 to 18 years of age kids, and that has proven to increase the educational outcomes by retaining them, first of all, no dropouts, and secondly, increasing their educational outcomes through their better performance in writing and doing maths. These are the skills through which we do. I agree with you that with the data limitations, we cannot like analyze and find out impact of everything. Yeah, but when we have such kind of program for a longer period of time, we may consider like having some baseline or midline, so that we can come up with the impact. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi. I just want to follow up, and we're talking a lot about behavior change and social behavior issues, starting from young children to adult or farmers and adopting new technologies. And I think far too often, I know from U.S. institutions and funders, it's very much of short-term goals, short-term priorities when it comes to evaluation or impacting longitude studies over long periods of time. Like, for example, I'm on a social behavior change project we're evaluating in Nigeria right now, looking at agriculture and adoption of new technologies. And these projects are only 3 years in length, and it's really hard to say, okay, you have your baseline, you have your midterm, and you have your final after 3 years, and say whether or not, what was the impact of the project and whether or not it was successful. I mean, those are very large questions to ask, but that's what the donor's concerned about. So how can we kind of go from a more of a strategic or visionary mindset to where we can think about long-term studies or long-term evaluation that are looking at, key themes within certain contexts, like school feeding projects is very that goes on in a lot of countries that funded by FAO or WFP and stuff like that, or looking at things like behavior change when it comes to anything from cleaning your community to hand washing, things like that. And far too often we're working in a world where we need to do it now and get it done, and not thinking about the long-term goals or objectives that need to be sustained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've probably got time for one or two more before we ask Serdar and Professor Lee to try and capture some key takeaways on this. No? Okay. Maybe something will occur to you. So, Serdar, do you want to start us off with some key takeaways?
Okay. Thank you for valuable opinions and comments and questions. Yeah, we most of us agree on that it is very important, but it is still hard to measure the behavior change. But it is extremely important to estimate the effect of the behavioral change, because in most of the human service programs, the realization of the impact is achieved by the change of the behavior of the participants. There are many academic theories about explaining how human beings determine their behavior change. And one of the most well-known theory is the cognitive behavior theory, which is developed in the field of psychology. And in that theory, they explain that the behavior is, before they make a decision on their behavior change, they have to change their minds or cognitive factors. So it is essential and it is important to intervene in the aspect of the their cognitive mental side of the participants. That's why I focused on the religious activities of the KFHI's approach. And in regard to the evaluation, we all know that the counterfactual approach, which is represented by the randomized evaluation, is the most strong, rigorous methodology to estimate the magnitude of the impact, but it has a very serious shortcomings because it cannot reveal the mechanism of the impact realization. But what I'm saying about how the behavior change is achieved is about the mechanism of the impact realization. So that's where the importance of the triangulation of a methodology comes in. So you have to combine with other methodologies like theory-based evaluation or other mechanism-based evaluation methodologies. So even though we conducted quantitative analysis for this presentation, but it is essentially theory-based evaluation. We set up the theory first, theory of change first, and then we test the individual causal link specified in the causal model. So it is mainly about the finding the mechanism of the impact realization. So that is due to, mostly due to the limitation of data, but also it has own purpose. So when we assign on the MOU and contracts at the first year, we decided on the research topics to be included in the first year. But in the future, we agreed on exploring the possibility of conducting randomized experiment in the future. As I forgot your name, but as you suggested, in time-wise, it was quite late for conducting evaluation because KFHI has been operating the program for over a decade, and they decide to do the rigorous impact evaluation after 10 years of operation. So in terms of time dimension, it is quite late to conduct the evaluation and the data collection, but it is a still ongoing program, and it will be still be implemented in the future. So it's not late for evaluating the impact of the part of the operation of the program to be conducted in the future. So in the first year, we analyzed the data which is already exist. But in the future, we will improve our data collection, and in the end, maybe we can agree on to conduct randomized experiments. So those are the things that we communicated during the partnership, and the communications and shared opinions. Those are the important factor to improve the products of the partnership and research. So I hope good results in the future with KFHI. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Serdar, key takeaways?
Yes, I will try. So to me, I mean, there are these important takeaways. Traditional partnership development efforts and approaches are no longer sufficient in responding to current development challenges and not conducive to sustainable and inclusive development. Partnerships need to have more ambitious goals, structured around shared values and objectives and mutual benefits. Partnerships need to address development challenges in an inclusive, multifaceted ways that result in systemic, long-lasting changes. We call them transformative as well. Dedicated resources and capacities are needed to initiate, further develop and maintain partnerships, including the need to assess progress and impact and address any concerns, issues, or risks. Partnerships have inherent risks, but risk management and due diligence processes must be in place to ensure protection, however, without imposing undue rigidity on partners. Evaluation and research can and should influence decision-making and inform decision-making in fostering, developing, and maintaining inclusive partnerships. This is it from me.
Thank you both very, very much. Really, really good summaries. I think we're about done. Any final comments? I mean, you should never leave a room thinking, I should have made that point. Any final comments before we go to a well-earned lunch? You've stunned them with your intellect. Well done, well done. Listen, thank you very, very much for your contributions. I hope you've enjoyed the session and it's given us some inspiration and a little bit of insight on how to move forward on this very, very complex agenda. So enjoy lunch and we'll see you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much all. Very nice meeting you and thank you for joining.